The all-new Harry Hill show's now at the later time of 11 o'clock, after the news.
Blair and Bush deliver a 24-hour ultimatum.
Tomorrow is a moment of truth for the world.
Saddam's response, "I'll take war anywhere in the world." And prayers in the desert as British troops prepare for action.
The ITV Weekend News with John Suchet.
Good evening. It's time to decide. Tomorrow is the moment of truth. Those were the momentous words of Tony Blair and George Bush today as they came out of their emergency summit with the Spanish Prime Minister in the Azores. It wasn't a declaration of war, quite, but it did effectively give the United Nations just 24 hours to back a US-British attack on Iraq or watch from the sidelines. From the Azores, Nick Robinson reports.
It wasn't meant to be like this. Tony Blair on the eve of war, leaving home with little support, arriving abroad with few new allies. Months of talking, days of diplomacy have failed to counter the impression that this is his war. George Bush ordered battle plans for Iraq just days after September the 11th, and days from now they look set to be implemented. Despite that, the leaders of Spain, Britain and the US insisted today that they were not yet declaring war. Maybe, but it sounded pretty much like it.
We concluded that tomorrow is a moment of truth for the world. Many nations have voiced a commitment to peace and security, and now they must demonstrate that commitment to peace and security in the only effective way: by supporting the immediate and unconditional disarmament of Saddam Hussein.
The UN was told it had till tomorrow to decide whether to back a final ultimatum to Saddam or to be ignored.
So now we have reached the point of decision, and we make a final appeal for there to be that strong, unified message on behalf of the international community that lays down a clear ultimatum to Saddam, that authorizes force if he continues to defy the will of the whole of the international community set out in 1441. We will do all we can in the short time that remains to make a final round of contacts to see whether there is a way through this impasse. But we are in the final stages, because after 12 years of failing to disarm him, now is the time when we have to decide.
Even now, the Prime Minister promised to do all he could to see if international agreement could still be reached.
We will do, in the next period of time, in respect of the resolution, what we believe to be in the interests of the UN. But I want to say why I think it is so important that even now, at this late stage, we try to get the United Nations to be the root of resolving this, because the threat is there and everyone accepts it.
Who did they blame for this failure to agree, this failure of diplomacy? Why, France, of course.
France showed their cards. After I said what I said, they said they're going to veto anything that held Saddam to account. So cards have been played, and we'll just have to take an assessment after tomorrow to determine what that card meant.
So there is just one more day for the international community to agree a final ultimatum to Saddam Hussein. One more day for him to flee or to disarm. One more day before a decision that's looked inevitable a long time now. A decision to go to war. Nick Robinson, ITV News, the Azores.
Tony Blair is still on his way back to Britain from the Azores. Nick Robinson is on the plane with him and is on the line now. Nick, a strict timetable and the clock already ticking?
It is ticking, but in fact it may take much quicker than that 24 hours. The Prime Minister has been talking to us on this flight and he talks about the key signal coming overnight. Britain's ambassador to the United Nations, Sir Jeremy Greenstock, is, as we speak, consulting with other UN members. What is he looking for? Something very simple. Is France going to move? Will France finally say that it is ready for some sort of ultimatum to Iraq? If it doesn't do that tonight or overnight, then even tomorrow will be wasted, John, in the Prime Minister's mind. He believes then diplomacy really will be at an end. We may see an emergency cabinet meeting then tomorrow. We may see the first steps to war. It's only if France moves that diplomacy in the Prime Minister's mind has any hours left.
Now, Nick, you're with the Prime Minister. Is this a man with no shred of doubt left in his mind?
There is none left. For those who believe he's tired, for those who believe that he's wearied by this and worried, I have to say he doesn't look it on this flight. When I put it to him, he said, we'll hold firm to the course. Asked about cabinet resignations, he said, we'll have to just see. He knows what he believes is going to happen. He knows what he believes is right. It is now just a matter of time.
Nick, thank you. So, attention now on the United Nations in New York. As we've heard, the 15 members of the Security Council have just hours to decide on their positions. Our correspondent Robert Moore is at the United Nations. Robert, obviously an enormous amount of pressure now on the Security Council members.
That's right, and John, I agree entirely with Nick's analysis. There are not days left in diplomacy, but now just a matter of hours. The UN Security Council will reconvene tomorrow, really under quite supreme pressure. They will face a very simple, brutally simple decision, whether to authorise, legalise or sanction a war that frankly is going to happen anyway. No sign here tonight that France, Russia or the undecided six nations are going to climb on board that war resolution. So I would expect tomorrow afternoon that Security Council resolution to be withdrawn, and that means diplomacy effectively would be at an end. The 12-year campaign to disarm Iraq by peaceful means will be at an end, and the United Nations and the Security Council will be left merely as spectators on the sidelines.
And with diplomacy at an end, Robert, what sort of timetable for attack?
John, what's unfolding here is a very dramatic timeline. The UN Security Council will meet here tomorrow morning. At the same time, in the White House Situation Room, President Bush will be meeting his national security team. I am then told that on Monday night or Tuesday night, President Bush will then address the American people. In that statement, sources are now saying he will make an explicit demand to Saddam Hussein that he flee the country immediately. That statement to the American people will also double up as a warning to weapons inspectors as well as to other international personnel in Iraq to leave the country for their own safety. At that stage, really an invasion of Iraq could happen at any stage, but it will not be a long delay at that stage because no one wants to give Saddam Hussein, certainly the White House does not, any time to better prepare his defences around Baghdad.
Thank you, Robert. Saddam Hussein's response to today's events was characteristically defiant. Iraq, he said, would wage war on America wherever there is sky, earth and water anywhere in the world. And that was echoed by his foreign minister. He said tens of thousands of martyrs were waiting to fight the Americans. On the streets of Baghdad, though, there were more down-to-earth concerns. From Baghdad, Neil Connery reports.
A president prepares his people. Saddam Hussein meeting with army leaders as he issues an emergency decree putting Iraq on a war footing. The country now split into 4 regions, each with a military commander. The president's son, Qusay, in the suit, is one of them, now in control of Baghdad and Tikrit, the family's hometown. State television broadcast news of the decree, saying it was designed to repulse and destroy any foreign aggression. In the Iraqi capital, the sandbagging goes on. Across Baghdad and beyond, they're preparing, as their president has told them to. Iraq's military are now on their highest state of alert. Government buildings and checkpoints are being manned by the army as this country goes on to a full war footing. At the Al Sham rug store, they were busy removing stock, fearful of the costs of war. The owner, Dia Al-Samareh, told me he's now cleared out most of the shop. In the past 48 hours, the people here have started to calculate what conflict will mean for them. Dia says he's taking precautions because he fears American bombs will fall on this street. This is a country now waiting for war. Iraq's military have been given their orders, as people here now face their third major conflict in less than a generation. Neil Connery, ITV News, Baghdad.
No one was listening more intently to the words of Mr. Blair and Mr. Bush today than the men and women who will be called on to fight if and when war comes. Across the desert sands of northern Kuwait, thousands of troops waited at their bases for the words that would send them into battle. And among the first into Iraq would be rapid deployment paratroopers. They're ready to be dropped into Baghdad. Geraint Vincent's been watching them at work and play.
If British forces do cross the Iraqi border, these men will be among the first. They're paratroopers, elite soldiers who pride themselves on being able to fight any kind of ground war, anywhere. Their Land Rovers, fitted with heavy machine guns and anti-tank weaponry, could form a key part of their advance.
You'll have coalition air going first, and aviation, then artillery, then the mortars, which are an integral asset of the battalion, and then we'll provide fire into an enemy position or enemy vehicles before our rifle companies go in and assault that position.
If they're not moving by Land Rover, helicopter or plane, then these all-terrain vehicles provide another option. Paratroopers train to be one of the most mobile units in the British Army, and any one of them will tell you that if they are given a job to do in Iraq, then it'll be done as quickly as possible.
All guns on axis! 10 meters forward!
Training is relentless, and the uncertainty over whether war will happen leads to an edgy, pent-up atmosphere. The tension is relieved by the occasional game of murder ball, a robust combination of rugby and wrestling. These men know that support for the war at home is marginal at best, but the debate about its justification is pushed to the back of the mind.
Well, I can't have an opinion. At the end of the day, I've got to do my job, whether my opinion's right or wrong. You know, there's people who have different opinions about everything in the world. You know, but at the end of the day, we've come here to do a job, and we're going to do it, and we'll do it well.
This is the first time the Parachute Regiment has deployed in such strength since the Falklands War. Of the coalition forces which will move into Iraq, should the order be given, it is a formidable component. Geraint Vincent, ITV News, Northern Kuwait.
To other news now. Royal aides breathed a sigh of relief today at the absence of any more damaging revelations in the Sunday press. Some newspapers had threatened to print details of a scandal that would truly have rocked the royals. Prince Charles's household was at the centre of many of the recent revelations, and sweeping changes are now being implemented there. Here's our royal correspondent, Tom Bradby.
If royal aides had once been nervous of today's headlines, they had little to fear. One paper had hinted it might publish an even more sensational allegation, but it hasn't emerged. There is, however, a looming battle for Diana's secret video recordings, in which she's alleged to claim Charles had an unhealthy relationship with his servant Michael Fawcett. Prince Charles's private secretary, Sir Michael Peat, has been dubbed the Axeman. The Queen wanted radical changes to her son's court, and she's getting them. Camilla is said to feel she's being sidelined. It seems neither Sir Michael nor the Queen want to see her emerge into any kind of public role. Michael Fawcett, the Prince's once indispensable personal servant, is also out. He'll be given freelance work, including the contract to organise Prince William's 21st, but for how long?
What is fascinating about Michael Fawcett for many people, I think, is it seems to unlock a key to a weakness in Prince Charles's character. His melancholy, his need to be supported, not necessarily by the most judicious of friends and retainers. And I think so long as Fawcett is around, there will be for many people a question mark over Prince Charles's real independence as a future king.
Last week's report was a gamble, but on the evidence of the past few days, it appears to have been successful. Prince Charles has taken the blame, and his new private secretary, Sir Michael Peat, has given a clear indication that in future, things are going to be done differently. Tom Bradby, ITV News at St James's Palace.
Police looking for a student who disappeared on Friday have found her body. Hannah Foster, who was 17, went missing after a night out with friends. Police have found her body in undergrowth near her home in Southampton. They believe she was abducted during the short walk home and murdered. Health officials have warned British holidaymakers to be aware of a highly contagious mystery virus. 9 people have died from it so far across the Far East and Canada. The symptoms are similar to pneumonia and include coughing, a sore throat and shortness of breath. And Anthea Turner and her husband Grant Bovey have had £40,000 worth of jewellery and clothes stolen from their home. Football. 1 red card, a disallowed goal and a penalty miss. Those were just some of the highlights of a controversial Scottish League Cup final between Celtic and Rangers today. Rangers eventually won the CIS Insurance Cup 2-1, but it'll all be debated for a long time to come. Here's Richard Slee.
It was Celtic who had everything to prove this afternoon. Their fans won't need reminding that it's 14 years since they beat their old firm rivals in a major cup competition. But it was Rangers who dominated most of the first half. Their first goal scored by Claudio Caniggia, the Argentinian taking advantage of some slack defending. A second came 10 minutes later, Lovenkrantz slipping it past Douglas in the Celtic goal. In the second half, Celtic were a different side. Henrik Larsson scoring from a corner, with just a little help from the keeper. 5 minutes later, it should have been all square, only for Hartson's goal to be unfairly disallowed for offside. Down to 10 men, Celtic were awarded a last-minute penalty, Hartson's miss summing up his team's afternoon. Rangers held on to win 2-1, and celebrations at this end of the stadium, Celtic fans already on their way home. Richard Slee, ITV News.
And it's been an emotional day for the British athlete Colin Jackson. He's been saying goodbye to international competition after almost 2 decades at the top. He missed out on a medal in his last ever international meet at the World Indoor Championships in Birmingham. America's Alan Johnson took gold. We end now by remembering that we are almost certainly about to go to war and reflecting on the horrors that war always brings. In these last decisive hours, the British soldiers who will make up the front line more than anyone will be contemplating what lies ahead. Juliet Bremner has been watching them preparing and praying.
Filing through the desert, not to fight, but to pray. The soldiers of the Black Watch battle group released from army exercises to take part in a Sunday service. Uncertain of what the coming days will bring, the Highlanders found comfort in the traditional sounds of home. On every mind, the thought that lives will almost certainly be lost in the name of world peace.
We may be the agents of war, but we bring war to find peace. Peace for the world. That's our aim here in the desert. It's to bring a better quality of life to the Iraqi people.
For some massed in this dusty corner of Kuwait, frustration is starting to creep in. They would like an end to the diplomatic delays. This is a brief respite from the daily drills of the desert. Perhaps the last chance to pause and reflect before a war that all these men are now certain they will be asked to fight in. Every hour, further confirmation that conflict is imminent. Ammunition for the cannons and chain guns was today loaded onto the armoured personnel carriers. On the ranges, a new gun was being tested. The Minimi is a rapid-fire machine gun, a welcome addition to the standard issue SA-80 that has a history of seizing up in sandy conditions. As they left Sunday prayers, minds more focused than ever on when the rehearsals will give way to battle. Juliet Bremner, ITV News, Northern Kuwait.
The British soldiers in the front line fearful of what war will bring, but ready to fight. And a reminder that George Bush and Tony Blair have given diplomats just 24 hours to unite behind a second resolution. After that, it is war. And that's the news. Immediately after this programme, you'll be able to see the news conference from the Azores in full on the ITV News channel. From the Weekend News team. Good night.
ITV National Weather, sponsored by PowerGen. PowerGen, power in good hands.
Good evening. It's already pretty chilly out there. It's going to get colder as we go through the night. Mist and fog patches forming too. So by the end of the night, there'll be a widespread frost and some dense fog to watch out for in places. So do take extra care tonight. And indeed, first thing tomorrow morning too. If you're out driving, it will be very misty. Gradually through the morning, most of the mist and fog patches will thin out and disappear. It is going to be another dry day right across Britain tomorrow. And for most of us, another sunny day too. Though down the east coast, you find some more cloud appearing through the afternoon and evening. Top temperatures tomorrow around 13. The rest of this week is also going to be dry. At night, it's going to be cold and misty, a frost around on many of the coming nights. But through the day, we'll see the mist and fog clearing, temperatures recovering, and most of this week is going to be fine and dry.
PowerGen. Power in good hands.